Welcome to Sykes Peak. Let's reach new heights together. And welcome to Sykes Peak, where we talk about things in psychology that are vitally important to your life. I'm Dr. Keith Roach,
I'm Sean Van.
and we welcome you to today's podcast. We have been talking about executive functioning, and we talked about putting this one off, but this one is task initiation and completion. So we thought we should go ahead and do the completion today. I have a question for you, Sean.
Great.
Have you ever started or thought about starting a task and you just can't do it, and then you dream about it that night?
Oh, interesting.
Well, I have. And here's a dream. It's a recurring dream.
Huh.
It comes up whenever I've got something ahead of me that I have to tackle.
Yeah.
And I have put it off as long as, writing a paper, preparing a speech, doing assessment. I mean, whatever it is.
Right.
I have this dream. And the dream is that I'm walking along a path and I come to the end of that path, and there is this huge, massive wall ahead of me. And I look to the right, and the wall goes on infinity. And I look to my left, it goes on infinity. And I turn around because I think this wall's too high to climb. It's too far to walk around. So I'm just going to turn around. And so I turn around to walk back down the path, and the path is covered with snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of taking the path that is covered with snakes, I turn around and I begin to climb. And I wake up, and then I go ahead and do the task.
Right. Roy would have a lot to say.
Oh my gosh. All of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Jung,
Yeah.
he would tear
that up.
Because there's already some issues about a wall.
He'd probably want to know a few more details about the wall and the snakes.
Right. And
what time of day it was, maybe. Yeah.
And was it light? Was it dark?
Yeah,
was
right.
It,
right.
Were
you young or old?
Animus, he would, but in my own mind, I knew I had to get it done. I knew I had to, I have to, because I'm on a deadline or I'm,
Sure.
And that may be how it is for some people. They just put off and put off and put off. And it's not, it's beyond the procrastination. It's the dread that's associated with doing whatever the problem is or the task is.
That weight.
Yeah. And it just, and it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't even know that a lot of people would even have maybe a dream that they could vividly recall like that. It could just be that they have a feeling or a sense about it.
For me, that is, like I said, it's a recurring dream. I mean,
that is fascinating
because I have, for the longest time, in everything that I've done, every occupation that I've had, I've had deadlines that I've had to deal with, and I have to get this in or this information in or this paper in or this assessment in or and some are just, black and white. They're just nailed down deadlines that have to happen. There's no, can I get 10 points off for turning it in a day late? No, I know the deadline months in advance. And
I do think in my sleep I have conversations with myself where I try to wrestle out problems and solutions for things, but
that's how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we are, know, so
I recently met with my roommate from high school. He lives in France right now. He is where he grew up most of his life. And I'm pretty sure it was our senior year. Yeah, it was our senior year. Wrote a lot of heavy papers in high school. Wrote some in a Bible class. Had three, I think it was 3 or 4 big papers. One was the sovereignty of God papers, what we called it. We had to validate that Jesus was actually God according to Scripture, and we had to first start the paper with an argument of why he might not be, why the Bible has some verses that seem like maybe he's not, and then conclude with how those actually didn't say that, right? And I remember being a master at procrastination for most of my life, and my roommate, not. We got the assignment. He was in the library the next day, as were many of my fellow students. We had a small library. So by the end of the first week, most of the library was empty on any books of the subject, and they all needed them. So I just waited. And I remember it was the day before, and we had a big play going on, production at our school, and I was helping with that. And my art teacher was a huge mentor of mine at the time. She asked me, how confident are you in your paper? You know, because everyone knew seniors had big papers coming up. And she said, how confident are you in your paper? I said, well, I think I've got the outline figured out. She was like, well, how much have you written? I was like, well, I mean, like actually written it out, like none. Yeah. And she's like, go home right now. What are you doing? I went home, and I went to all my fellow seniors in the dorm. I went to each of their rooms and grabbed like 2 books in each room. The ones that looked like, yeah, that looks like something.
Yeah, it's got that'll match up with my outline.
And I had all my thoughts lined out. I knew what verses I was going to use. And I knew my arguments, and I just sat and wrote it out in probably, I don't know, 8 hours. Just typed it all out and cited stuff in the books fairly well. And day before it's due, it was like a 15, maybe 20-page paper. I had turned it in, and my roommate, who had his done weeks in advance, I think I got something like 3 or 4% higher than him. Oh. He was so aggravated. He was so aggravated with me.
People like you.
Yeah. He's like, what? Yeah. Like, I've been done for months, and I've had it proofread, and you just wrote this last night. How? Oh, man. Yeah. Well, and for the longest time, like we've talked in the past about those confirmation biases. And I always had it in my mind that I didn't work good under pressure. I worked only under pressure.
Right.
And that if I was going to do a good job with the task, I should put it off. I should wait until the last minute so that stress motivated me and pushed me to do a better job. And as I got older, I realized the crippling effect that could have and the problems that it could generate when there were unforeseeable things that would come up. So I did learn to help myself by trying to start on projects earlier.
Right. And you know, the just getting started.
Yeah.
Is like lighting a match to a fuse, because all of a sudden you are doing all these other things. You're getting all these other things accomplished as you're doing the task that you need to do, because you realize, well, this has to be done before this, and you start getting all these things done, and all of a sudden you just have all this production, this productive activity that's going on, and sometimes that activity goes off into tangents or goes off into rabbit holes, which leads us to the other part of the task initiation to the point of completion. It is basically dealing with that stuff that's in the middle that is the toughest part, to stay on target, to stay on task, to stay in
keep your priorities.
Right. Yeah. Because this is a problem that a lot of kids have, and a lot of people, a lot of adults have, and, is that they call it multitasking,
Oh,
but it's multi-distraction more than it is
yeah.
multitasking. And I mean, it happens to all of us because we start working on something. Around my house, I'll say, for
Mhm.
example, I'll start working on something, and then I find myself out by the garbage can at the end of at the end of my driveway,
Mhm.
and thinking, how did I get here? Because I was in my garage working on something else, but that led to something else, led to this, led to that, led to this.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm going to go, and here I am standing at the end of my driveway with my trash can. Um, you know, how do you stay on task? What's a good way to stay on task?
Procrastinate everything else.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, really, if I'm out gardening and then I notice that my spigot, my faucet outside is dripping, right? I have to, in my head, not allow that to become priority, and say, okay, I had to add it to the list,
That's a new list.
right?
Yeah.
That's a different task, and then finish the one I'm on first, and then move on because, I mean, I'll look
That's
at I'll
so
look at
hard
it can
for
be
people.
well,
I
and look,
mean,
and
it's just,
sometimes when you are in a situation, maybe the gardening is less important than the dripping, right? Maybe the dripping is more. That's going to
costing
cost
you
me
money.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's costing you money.
Maybe it's overwatering the plants that's going to kill them, right? Okay, so maybe we need to shift our priorities, and that's fine. That happens. But what happens when I go go to the garage to get the wrench, and I notice that the floor in my garage is so dirty that I'm like, oh, I need to sweep this.
Yeah.
Look at this could be a fire hazard. All this straw in here or something. So I go to sweep, and then I notice that my lawnmower is leaking oil. I'm like, oh no, that's a problem. Don't want that to become a worse problem. And now I've got the whole engine taken apart, and you know, neighbors are wondering
What's
what.
going? Yeah.
Yeah,
What's he doing?
your wife's looking at you like, what are you doing? You know,
Right.
like why
Right.
why is this halfway painted and this over here? Like, what is going on, right?
And what is that trench that's coming from the drip
Yeah.
that is leading towards the garden?
Right.
Because you
Right.
said, okay, I'm just going to channel that water.
You have 10 half-finished projects and
Right.
not one completed.
Right.
Yeah.
So task initiation, we've talked about that before in the other podcast on executive functioning, but um, you know, just recognizing getting started is
Right.
the big issue or the biggest issue,
Right.
in taking that step. And I think one of the things that holds you back is, in a lot of instances, is the just a lack of confidence. So we talked about confidence
Can be.
before in self-esteem,
Mm.
because we're not confident in knowing what we're doing, or
We're prepared.
you know you I'm working. I've got an issue with a lawnmower right now.
Mm.
It needs a new carburetor. Well, I have, I've ordered a new carburetor, and so I'm waiting on it. It's
Mm.
supposed to be here shortly,
Mm.
but in the meantime, what do I do? I mean, what can I do with this lawnmower? I mean, it's kind of in the way right now,
Mm.
and so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I can just go ahead and take off the old carburetor, just have it all, pulled out and
Mm.
everything
Mhm.
taken off. But then I realize I got to remember where all those bolts go, that I'm, taking off, and so I
Always take a picture with my phone.
which is a great idea,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm not even sure that the carburetor nowadays. I
Mm.
mean, I ordered the part that goes with the lawnmower, so on
Right.
and so on.
Sure.
But a lot of you don't know that part's going to
Mhm.
fit
Mhm.
right back onto that lawnmower, right? So anyway, I haven't initiated that task
Mhm.
yet, but it's one of those things that lingers in my mind. And I'm sure, our listeners, people that are dealing with task initiation, they have they have their reasons why they haven't
Mhm.
started something. And um, I guess the best thing is to get to a point where you have worked through all the issues that you think that might come up. And my wife gives me a hard time on this because she'll ask me to fix something, or
Mm.
and then I have to think it through. I have to think about what's going to be,
Right.
if I have to turn the water off, or if I have to turn the electricity off, or that it's going to be off for a certain period of time, and that I've got to make sure that I've got all the pieces that I
Mm.
need, so I don't have to keep going back to.
Did that come from experience where you've jumped into projects too soon, or does it just kind of like your natural style to do that?
It's probably experience. Like I said, my dad did some construction on the side, when I was a kid, but you know, we knew, and we knew from planning
Mm.
and prioritizing
Mhm.
what we needed to do each
Right.
day. So that's part of all this is part of the
Mhm.
executive functioning,
Mhm.
that we've been talking about. But planning and prioritizing, organizing, not losing it emotionally.
Right.
If something goes wrong,
Getting frustrated that the
right,
bolt is on too tight or
right.
the paint isn't mixing to the right color you needed. Yeah.
Having so doing things like this, once you get to a certain point, you go, okay, now I can start. And
Mhm.
you do it with confidence. You do
Mhm.
it with, um, uh, you know, a specific um, processing in your mind. I'm going to get this done and completed today.
I know.
Or,
I know. In ADHD, this is can be an issue for people. ADD, ADHD, just sort of that neurological wheelhouse.
mhm,
I know for me, sometimes I hold back getting into projects until they're so uncomfortable that waiting any longer.
mm,
I just can't. I can't anymore.
yeah,
I've been wanting to replace my sheets for some time, and I've been waiting because I wanted to make sure that I built up some finances so that if something happened, I didn't need them before going and replacing making expensive purchases or something, right?
right.
More than my sheets. There's also tossing a bunch of other stuff. But point is that okay, if it's an unnecessary expense and my sheets are fine right now, do I really need to replace them? It's not a big priority. And so what I'll do is I'll just wait until I'm so frustrated at the fact that that project has sat on a list for so long. I'm tired of looking at it. It just irritates me that it's there anymore.
Right.
Um, Sometimes I put boxes I want to burn by my back door, and they just pile up. And eventually, it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with it.
Yeah,
Right?
I did that this morning.
See, yeah.
So uh,
But so maybe so for listeners who are out there who are struggling with when they have that sort of it builds up for me to a point of being unbearable, how could they start something sooner? How could they get prompted themselves?
well, I mean, I think it's like you said. Well, it goes back to the things we talked about with the planning and the prioritization. How much of a priority is this in your list?
Mm.
And if it's on your list, if it's in the top 10 or the top 5 or the top 20, you know, that this is something else that you can take off of your list. And you initiate the task
Right.
and you take it all the way to completion. You have to, this is one of those challenges where you have to fight off stuff, because, you know, something will catch you out of the corner of your eye, or something, um, will distract you
Right.
from completing the task.
Right.
And then you have, like we talked about in the last episode, which that you have 10, 10 tasks that are not completed.
Right.
And so, it's being able to um, keep that priority in your mind saying, I'm getting this accomplished today. And when I look at things and I go, this is a 3 out of 5 hammers,
Okay.
or I
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
it and I
Yeah.
go, this is going to take 2 to 3 hours. We purchased some patio furniture.
Mm.
Um, and I thought yesterday, and I thought, I got to get it to put this stuff together. Because if I don't, it'll sit in my car, for days. And so I went, got it out of my car, took it over, cut the box open,
Right.
and started putting this together. And it took me 3 or 4 hours to
Right.
put, not that many screws
Yeah.
together, but I was doing it by myself, and
Oh, yeah.
and didn't have an extra hand to hold it or anything like that. But I thought, I've got to get this completed today. If I don't, I don't have any other
So
time.
you had a clear goal of what you wanted and when you wanted it by,
Right.
and you were able to break your goal down so that your task. I think about some things that I need to do in my life that are seasonal, like um, maintenance for my air conditioning. I
Right.
need to make sure that I've got my vents cleaned out before the
Right.
summer heat kicks in to make sure I don't, overdo and cause maintenance issues and problems
Mm-hmm.
for my air
Mm-hmm.
conditioner to cut off in the middle of August, right?
Right.
So when you think about those things, I think for a lot of people too, it could be helpful to again think of those lists and maybe put it on your calendar every
Right.
year. When February comes around, I start maintenance on my air conditioner so that by the time summer comes around, if
So
it
it's
takes
on,
me a while, yeah,
once again, it's on the list,
yeah,
uh, and it's good to have the list so that you can mark it off, because when you mark it off and because it's completed, there's a sense of satisfaction, and there's a flood of dopamine that runs through your brain that enhances that satisfaction
yeah,
in the process. Now, you can sit around and you can dwell on the dopamine,
yeah,
or you can go, okay, what's next on the list?
yeah,
And so that's the place where we're at. So
right,
we recognize that as part of executive functioning, that it takes planning and prioritization, it takes organization, it takes emotional stability, um,
belief in what,
belief in oneself, self-esteem, confidence, and going ahead and taking the step to initiate the task,
right,
and then focusing on the process, um, focusing on the work, excuse me, and taking it all the way to the point of completion,
yeah,
and then marking it off the list,
yeah,
and then reprioritizing your list.
yeah,
That's what would happen when we do our punch list.
yeah,
We would work on what we could work on that day, and then we would have whatever was left. We would reprioritize what was left for the next day and add what we needed to do, and that kept us productive.
Part of the reason I'm able to make a new list of 100 things every year so quickly and easily that, well, one of them, the last one is always make a new list for next
Make
year.
a new list.
But
That's
the,
right.
but the other thing is I'll carry over things from the previous year, things
Yeah.
that I didn't quite get to that still mean something to me and are important. At the end of every day, I go through my checklist at work. I check everything off, but the things I didn't get to, when I make my list for tomorrow, I make sure those stay on there if they
Yeah.
need to be done. So,
There used to be, one of the things that I would do when I was doing counseling, and you keep your notes on each client, but things that linger with you through the day. Um, maybe it was an issue that was particular to one client or another, um, but it's something that that still remains in your head. And somebody suggested, write that on a legal pad,
mm,
pray about it, and then put the legal pad underneath your seat in your car, and then you leave it
mhm,
in your car. and then you go and you be with your family, because, as a counselor, you're dealing with, people's issues all day
Right.
long. And those issues, can be horrendous, and some can be, easy, um, but there's still an emotional bite from each one of those issues. So instead of taking that emotion with you into your house and into your family, you write it down, you leave it in your car, and you dad,
Yeah. Yeah.
or be who you need to be to your family. And that was always important to me, because if you know, I didn't carry it with me, and um,
Yeah. Heavy things we need to let go of, and we need to, I think, like you said, kind of put away. But I also think it's important too, what you were talking about with task completion and, crossing things off and getting that flood of dopamine of I did something, I had that achievement. I also think it's really important to keep a list of the things that you've achieved.
mhm.
There's a
Oh yeah,
reason. There's a reason why people hang up their degrees and certifications in
right,
offices, and there's a
right,
reason why, um, you know, people keep trophies and stuff. And I
yeah,
think that when we have lists and we have accomplished things like cleaned the entire garage top to bottom, fantastic.
right,
Like keep that written somewhere on your fridge and just keep a running list of victories you've had over the
right,
year with things that you've accomplished that you're proud of,
right.
even if they seem small. That helps kind of remind you that you can do those difficult, challenging, sometimes daunting tasks that you sit there and stare at forever before you finally get the motivation to get up and do.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. All right. Thank you for listening to Sykes Peak. We will be tackling a new topic in our next podcast, and we're just glad that you stopped to listen. I'm Dr. Keith Roach,
I am Sean Van.
and we thank you for listening to Sykes Peak.